Hello to anyone watching this video. You've probably, or well, you may have already have seen the video I released, which was just a review, or really more of a reflection on William Maxwell's "So Long, See You Tomorrow." That should have been posted to the channel at least a few days ago by the time this video goes out. But I just thought it was maybe a good idea just to sort of, just record a sort of introductory video for the channel that sort of just outlines my vision, or well, vision's probably too strong of a word. It certainly implies too much forethought and care. But I guess at least sort of my hopes, again, maybe too strong of a word, but I guess my hopes, or sort of my idea of what I want this channel to be, and just what you can expect from it, and just also just to, I guess, outline my own sort of a viewpoint on it as well. Also not my own viewpoint on the channel, but my viewpoint on literature, and I guess just my viewpoint on social media interaction as a whole. So I just thought it might be good. Basically, I have just to show that there is going to be some amount of care in the channel, or at least forethought. Firstly, as you can see, I'm wearing a tie. I just thought, very formal for this introduction, just to really set the standards high, and just so we can watch them slip over however many years, or even months, or weeks, or days this or seconds this channel goes on for. But I also prepared a list of just sort of questions that you might have. I presumptuously written them up, trying to read your mind, what sort of questions you might have of another booktuber on YouTube, or just anyone on YouTube. I basically just written them out, and I'll just be sort of reading through a list, again, just to provide some clarification. And hopefully just to have a video for posterity, so that, we'll just hopefully save any sort of tautologies down the line in any sort of future reviews, just to have all this information just compacted into this one video. So question one, I'm reading off the paper now. Why listen to me instead of so many other booktubers? Why take, why choose to spend, half an hour with me in a video versus someone else? And my answer to that is there's no real reason. I can't really argue why. I can't really promise that I'm, radically different to that many other booktubers. At least the literary ones who do provide analysis, and actually look at, really get into the sort of nitty-gritty of the text, and really discuss themes rather than just providing a plot synopsis like those sort of ending explained videos, those sort of aggrandized Wikipedia summaries that you can often get, which pass for criticism in the modern day. So this isn't so much a question, but I just thought I should know that perhaps, and just a way as to summarize the channel, although, the video will be titled something along the lines of, what to expect from my channel, or, or perhaps that question might be posed in the, in the description. I do think perhaps a better sort of question would be what not to expect. I just want to say this outright. Please do not expect regular updates, any form of an upload schedule, and do not expect any upgrades to the production value from what you can see now. If anything, just expect downgrades. Just expect standards to potentially slip. It's not that I really do love talking about, I love talking about literature, I love talking about film, any sort of art, really. However, I would be completely, I would be lying just if I said, that I'm going to be really making this my, my focus, because it's not really. It's just a sort of fun little side project, is mainly what the channel is. And I also would hate to, create any sort of false expectations or any sort of promises, that I can't deliver on. I know that false promises are almost sort of, people are pretty inured to them now, with so many not failed, but, Kickstarters, and all those many Kickstarter promises that have been reneged upon again and again. But yes, I don't want to create any sort of false promises, because I just think it would be unfair for anyone who's watching this or watching this channel. So what is the aesthetic of the channel going to be? So as I said, not really going to be too much in terms of production value, just probably me with some sort of background, just with this bookcase here. probably somewhere around my attic, which is where the majority of my own library is. There's a few more books downstairs in my in my house, but they're sort of books that my family share. So yeah, but these are. I'll probably be staying up here in the attic, which is it sort of also doubles as a library space for me, and as you can probably see, also a place to keep my record collection, and also in that corner some CDs slash Blu-rays of mainly the Criterion collection. So yeah, pretty much just a hipster's sort of den up here. But yes, the aesthetic will be quite minimal. I don't really want to be editing, too much. I do know how to edit, roughly, or at least I used to know how to edit when I was sort of doing a more hands-on, practical sort of film unit at university, and using Adobe Premiere a lot, Premiere Pro, and I do sometimes film the odd sort of experimental short film, which isn't very good, but I still occasionally do that. So I do sort of know how to edit, but I want to try and keep editing minimal. I don't really want any gloss, just mainly myself talking to you, the hypothetical viewers or viewer, singular, which it will probably be in all reality. The only other thing I wanted to add with that sort of note around editing is that the only edits that will sort of be present is if there's some sort of major interruption, or if I'm just find I've really gone off on a tangent, or just made a horrible sort of just a real salad of thoughts, and I just thought, well, no one is going to want to listen to this, or it's actually just unfair to sort of waste your time subjecting you to that. So that will be the only time when there's sorts of edits that you might see, just cuts. But otherwise, I don't think there's going to be any sort of flashy editing. Maybe the odd bit of keyframing or whatever, if I need to put up an image in a corner or something like that, or an extract. But yeah. So, on to the next question. So why did you want to start this channel, you might wonder? You might be asking, why did I want to start this channel? And basically, the main, I really should just be, forthright and frank about this. Is that although I have been watching some fantastic booktubers for a while, and I thought to myself, it really is great just to see those sorts of discussions going on in the comments, and sort of get some just to foster an interesting discourse on literature, particularly when literature seems to sort of be at least in its proper and sort of healthiest form is sort of dying out a little bit at the moment. So I just thought it might be nice in that regard. But, really what did push me into starting this channel, unfortunately, is just that I am hoping to be someone who makes their career in writing. Unfortunately, it does seem that, a majority of publishers, at least from what I've read and heard about the sort of industries, that they do expect a sort of degree of online presence. And so I didn't really want to have to sell my soul, or, become some of those writers you sometimes see where it's, you just live your entire life on social media, Instagram and, Twitter, just sort of posting about books that you don't actually read, or, like 100 books that you buy in a month, or, just these very, just questions, just basically not even posing questions, just these very basic sort of comments saying, I love this book. I didn't want to do that because it's just a waste of time, and I think it's a waste of everyone's time, really. It's just not a very sort of rewarding way in which to engage in art. It just sort of reduces it to, just sort of reduces books to cold capital. It's just not very nice. So, I didn't want to have to sell my soul, or, contribute to this sort of time-wasting problem, or, this sort of, this problem of superficial engagement with art. But I did nevertheless think, well, maybe I should try and look at somehow creating some form of profile or presence online. And so I thought, well, it's not going to exactly, I don't think I'll be getting a sort of silver play button anytime soon, or or whatever. But I thought, well, maybe maybe even at most, in sort of the far off future, maybe there might be 100 or so people, maybe even 1,000 subscribing to the channel, and that might at least just create the illusion of a sort of online presence. And it's still actually something that I would enjoy, and that I think would at least not be it might be something that some other person out there in the world might at least get something out of. So yeah. All right, so I guess just a sort of natural follow-up question then is, what is my background? And, exactly what are my qualifications for talking about literature? To answer that second question, I would say pretty much none. I'm just an undergraduate university student at the moment, although a bit of not a truant university student, but, one who hasn't actually been at university for the last 2 years, because I've been taking some time off just due to some personal matters and so forth. Nothing terrible. You don't need to. Please do not worry. But I have been taking some time off. But yeah, I'm just an undergraduate student. I'm doing 2 majors, English and film. But I haven't actually gained that qualification yet. So I would say I'm pretty much unqualified. But nevertheless, I do really I do love art, and it has given me so much in my life and just helped me through some, any sort of difficult times. And so I do owe a lot to it, and I love discussing it and sort of being able to, dive into someone else's perspective. When you sort of attend or absorb an artwork, it's just one of the greatest sort of thrills, and I guess just sort of little sort of moments of transcendence, or at least one of the highest forms of transcendence I've found that you can really gain in the world. So I do love art, and I do always try and challenge myself to really look at everything in terms of form and theme and how they sort of play with each other, or sort of interact. And then in terms of my other background, as I mentioned earlier, I don't really want to call myself a writer. I've had a few poems published, and a few personalized rejection letters for short stories, and an essay or a few other poems, and so I would hesitate to call myself really a professional writer, because I'm very much not. But I suppose that's sort of the outside of some tutoring that I used to do. That's sort of the closest thing I've had to a career. So yeah, that's pretty much my background. So. Then, as another follow-up question to all of that, what do I value in art? And so basically, what would my rating system be based on? And really, my rating system, I guess sometimes I might feel like I'll give it, I'll give out a score to something, which will just be based on a 5, out of 5, and including half stars, so 4, 4.5, and 3.5, and so forth. But I guess my main thing that I really look out for in art, at least what I've realized over the years, is, as I mentioned before, how form and theme mix, and also how, you don't just, also a blend not only of form and theme, and a really masterful one at that, but also a masterful blend of the visceral and the cerebral. I don't tend to like works that are just pure emotion, and I also don't like works that are just really, cold and academic and overly cerebral. I always like the cerebral to be embedded in the visceral, or embodied in the visceral in some way. So yeah, that's sort of the main, I guess that's sort of the main general criteria. Of course, there's always some degree of subjectivity in art, but I guess I also like to think that there's, that's at least a sort of, allows for at least some sort of, not completely objective, but at least a little bit more of a sort of stable criteria, so that it's not just, that everything, every time you read something, it's not just sort of up to the sort of whims, or vagaries of one's, mind on that day. So yeah, that's basically how I'll be overall valuing any sort of art I discuss on the channel. Then, another question that may potentially be raised in these reviews is that if I ever do leave a negative review, which I'm hoping not to necessarily, is that, so why would I leave? I guess the better question to ask is, if you see a negative review, why do I feel like, why leave that review? Particularly because as I said, I am someone who's hoping to be, make a career in writing, and also I've had a few things published. Well, I guess the two things to that is that, firstly, I'm not going to just publish negative reviews just for the sake of it. It would have to be something like, I feel like if I ever were to leave a negative review publicly, particularly in the form of video review, it would have to be very generative, and that I would feel that it was either a work that hadn't sort of been a work that actually had major flaws in my view, that were, sort of quite severe, and that hadn't really been addressed by other people publicly, or at least, they weren't really being aired or in the discourse, or it would just be or that if that critique were to actually sort of generate better outcomes for people, I guess, people who are looking to reflect on writing and what it can do, or what, sometimes how it could falter or how it could succeed. So it would only ever be from a very I guess the motivation to be as generative as possible and constructive. And I'm absolutely never going to just be, seeking things out just to hate on. If I don't like the sound of something, I'm not going to read it. I should actually say that here as well, that unfortunately I'm always, I am looking for recommendations. And there's been so many brilliant books and films and so forth I've discovered online that I never would have found otherwise. But I can't promise that I'm going to necessarily, if people do leave recommendations, they're going to check everything out, because I do sort of, I have developed a sort of, my own personal preferences for certain works and whatnot, and certain, themes that interest me most over the years. And so if something just doesn't sound like, if something sounds like it's not going to really align with those, I'm just not going to really seek it out, because I just know I'm probably not going to enjoy it. And, I don't want to just be, this channel just to be a sort of, I don't know, like a cesspit of, like negativity, or, like a bubbling tar pit of sort of bitterness. So I absolutely, I'm not going to be just seeking things out to hate on. And also I'm not just, even if I end up reading something that I don't end up liking, I'm not, outside of maybe logging it on Goodreads with a brief sort of reflection or something, or maybe writing some own private thoughts, I'm not necessarily just going to, be reviewing everything I read on the channel, and particularly not things that I end up disliking if I don't really feel that those critiques are really generative enough, or, if it's actually of an author I really respect, or, I like, because, it would just sort of seem wrong, or it would misrepresent my overall impression of them, I guess, as a writer. And, I think in a time when literature and art generally are under threat, it's not great just to sort of, unless you have a really good reason to, really go in on something publicly, unless it's actually going to be for, it's going to sort of generate benefits, as I mentioned before. Nevertheless, in noting that, I guess the question around that might be, and sort of the last question I have here is, but why do I think that, it's even sort of ethical to sort of, then to sort of discuss things negatively publicly, if I am also sort of adjacent to the publishing scene or the literary world, which, I'm very, very much, I actually, adjacent is not the right word, that I'm sort of, not in the orbit, but, I'm in a sort of random corner, far-flung corner of the galaxy of the literary world, or the universe of the literary world, rather, is, I guess, for that, that response is that I do, hopefully, I guess I don't actually want to be reading things that inspire any sort of negative reaction. I want almost every piece of art that I want every piece of art that I go and, that I go to view to be, just a fantastic experience. I don't actually want there to be sort of bad pieces of art. So, that's why I don't want to just seek things out that I know I'm going to hate, or, things that are just obviously sort of quite, that are obviously just sort of jokes, or things that are not, that are obviously of very questionable quality. Something that jumps out to mind immediately is that book that Maggie Nelson just wrote about Taylor Swift and Sylvia Plath. Like, I'm obviously not going to go and read that, because that's obviously headed for like a 0 stars, or perhaps even negative stars. I do not want. I don't want that. But I do think, though, that, I do want to try and live in a, hopefully, inhabit a world where, art is generally, of a really sort of, is of the highest standard, and I do feel that sometimes, sharing criticism publicly, is sometimes helpful to that, and, it's never motivated by me just trying to sort of just, lessen the reputation of another writer, which is absolutely ridiculous anyway, because that just implies that I think any booktuber, or particularly someone who with no subscribers, and someone who inevitably will never have many subscribers at all, as I said, probably I can imagine tops 1,000 or something like that. So I think it's pretty ridiculous, because it's not like I'm ever going to have a position of influence by which to lessen a writer, even if I wanted to. But no, it's very much about just wanting to try and sort of I guess it's in the interest of bettering art and contributing to the discourse around it. And I think, if you go back a few decades ago, I'd really love the art world to be able to return to the days when, more artists were critics, and they were actually sometimes arguing with each other, but, very much in good faith. I always think about, you go back to Truffaut and Godard. Well, I guess Godard sometimes maybe was just being a bit of a contrarian hipster and not always potentially arguing in good faith. But, I think it's sort of, that would have been it was a sort of much healthier place, I suppose, where you didn't have to sort of have this barrier between, I'm an artist, thus I cannot say anything negative, or, I can't even say anything at all, really. About other artists, or about art generally at that time. I think it's much better where you can actually review things as well. That sort of criticism and one's own. That criticism is a creative output in a way. It's part of one's sort of external identity just as much as one's own art is. And I just think about that amazing list that Truffaut published a long time ago, which was, I think, naming basically directors who were making films of acceptable standard in France, because he saw that so much of the industry at that time. I don't know what he'd think about it today, but the industry at that time were just the industry at the time was just so it was faltering, and quite sort of I guess feeble in a sort of in terms of imagination. And I just think, I just wish there were sort of more things like that. And I should say, that I'm absolutely not comparing myself to the brilliance of Godard or Truffaut or anyone like that, or even any of the writers, who were critics back in the day. But I'm absolutely not doing that because I don't think I'd ever, even reach one sort of atom of that, of their level. But I just think it's a sort of a relevant and sort of I guess sometimes an overlooked sort of point about the differences between where criticism used to be and where it is today. So that's pretty much the video then. Hopefully that was helpful, and it licensed you to any questions, or clarified any sort of questions that you might have had. And I'll leave a few links. I was just going to say, if you do want to ever sort of have a look at my film criticism, again, I'm completely unqualified about that, aside from just studying film at university. You can find a link to my Letterboxd account. I don't really like talking about film as much, strangely. I think I feel a bit more comfortable talking about literature, at least at the moment. And also just because I've got so many Letterboxd reviews at the moment. I've wasted many I guess days cumulatively writing on Letterboxd that I just may as well link to that. So if you do want to read any of my thoughts on films, you can always just drop a follow there. Or I'll also probably leave a link to my Goodreads account, which I don't update that regularly. But it's still just something if you just ever wanted just to see I guess shorter reviews for things that I don't really feel warrant a video, even a quick sort of summary video. Is that it? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I also might leave a link to my own website for my writing, although I don't know, it does actually feel a little bit weird doing that. So I may not do that. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to, I guess, some hearing discussion down the line for when I release a few more reviews or reflections on various books, and just hearing other people's opinions and so forth. It's it will be quite interesting, and I'm quite excited for it, actually. So and as I said, I can't promise how consistent I'll be or how long I'll be even on YouTube as a platform, but I just thought for a little while at least it will be an interesting experiment and a fun side project. So bye.